welcome to yet another episode of the Gamers Advocate podcast. We are joined with Banana Hammock Republic, yay! And myself, Legion. We're going to be going over a very interesting subject, unlike our other subjects that we go over.
Finally getting to the interesting stuff.
We're going to go over Dragon Age companions off the top of our heads. Unfortunately, I entered Dragon Age Origins almost apprehensively because I knew it was going to be the spiritual successor to Baldur's Gate. And once I realized pretty quickly that it wasn't Baldur's Gate, I was reticent to push forward. And I just would do it, but I always felt like I was missing something. Like, where's the meat and potatoes here? And there's plenty there. It's just when you order one meal and you get something just as good, but it's not what you ordered. There's something to be said about what you're expecting versus what you got. For me, Dragon Age Origins is a great game. It really is. It's just it took me a while to get to that point to realize it. And I have played it multiple times, so it's not that I'm unfamiliar with the game. It's just that very first experience with it wasn't one that I dove in saying, yeah, all right, I got to get, because it wasn't one of those games where I played it when it was released versus being told, hey, look, you got to go back and play this game. You got to play it, being told over and over, and then expecting something and then getting what you kind of expected. But we're just going to go over kind of like a very brief overview of companions in Dragon Age Origins. I'm going to try to go over them somewhat sequentially as you meet them. Some of them could vary just based on where you go, because some of the companions are in locations that you may visit one before another. We'll start off with Alistair. Alistair, the reticent would-be king, I guess. He's interesting. Alistair is not someone I totally expected from, the Baldur's Gate experience I had. A character that would be somewhat fleshed out, and he definitely is. But I didn't expect my very first companion to be this snarky individual who was going to be with me for the whole campaign, because those snarky individuals that are kind of like that, they kind of have a short shelf life. And I was thinking, okay, this guy's going to die. I kept thinking Alistair's going to die probably in the first chapter or whatever. And from the very first meeting he has, then he's like giving the priest a hard time. Like, okay, I really do like this guy. He's speaking from the heart. He's not saying just duty calls and I must answer type character. He's definitely fascinating. He's very intelligent. He doesn't get enough credit for being intelligent because his humor is directly portrayal of how quick-witted he can be. He's designed only as a fighter, though. I tend to make him fighter shield because I do need that defense at the beginning. But he's almost better off as a build for just like kind of just swordsman, like not the two-handed sword, but using his shield, I use it more of like a second sword, almost kind of like a DPS melee fighter. He's almost better off, it seems like, that way, just in how he's built. But what are your experience with Alistair?
I remember liking Alistair. He does have that kind of like sarcastic, kind of snarky humor to him, and he definitely seems like the type of person who's been kind of pushed into this position where he has to take things seriously, and there's that kind of veneer over the top of that he's kind of convincing people that it's not that big a deal, but there's always that kind of underlying understanding that he does take his, responsibilities pretty seriously. And then the kind of reveal that he is essentially the heir to the throne is done pretty well, because there's not a lot of, like, from what I remember, it's been a while, there's not a lot of stuff that points in that direction until it's kind of revealed, and then the pieces fall into place, and you're like, oh, so you don't even really want this. It's that's kind of why you went off in your own direction and did all this other stuff, and that explains a lot of like who you are. But as far as like the actual gameplay, I don't remember using him a lot. I remember starting with him, and he's definitely within that like Grey Warden section. Before the joining ceremony, he's definitely the most useful. But he, I don't remember bringing him a lot unless it was like appropriate for the point in the story we were at.
Yeah, to be clear, we're not doing companions that were brief companions either. So Sir Geordie, and the other guy, what was his name? Can't remember his name, but the ones that you have in the
Dareth, something like that.
Yeah, Davith. Yeah, we're not going to include them, although we could talk about them. But Alistair is really quick-witted and snarky. But here's the thing: when you're in combat, when you're in a very serious situation, he retains that to a point. But he does know the tone, and so when they're worried about being ambushed by a darkspawn or something, he reassures them and says, "Look, just rest assured, I will know when they're around. You don't have to worry about being ambushed," things like that. And he calms them for the most part, and so he does need them to be ready and available. So just telling them don't worry about is probably not the best way to do that. So he does have some leadership capabilities to it. You see it here and there. So backed into a corner, he can be that person. And I've always found that kind of interesting for him because, again, he's the would-be king. And he is the best choice, in my opinion, because he doesn't want it. That to me is perfect.
Yeah.
He's never shocked by anything. So he has a lot of worldly wisdom to him. He was an ex-Templar, so he has that experience to go by. So he's got the battle mentality. He also has the understanding of the religions and everything that goes along with that. He's got that backing. Now he's got some Grey Warden backing, and he knows that means that he may not have a long life. So he's accepting his fate. There's a lot of good things about Alistair, but when you first meet him, it's not one of those type characters you're going to be endeared with, and you're probably not going to think, I need to bring him along because I really like him so much. There's a lot there to grow into, and so it's a character I think that was masterfully written because it's someone that you can bring in later playthroughs once you realized who he is and what you can do with him, that in later playthroughs you can say, I want to play with Alistair a little bit more. I want to hear what he says about this scenario. I want to hear what he says about this companion or whatever. And he's a very interesting character.
Yeah, I think his background as a Templar was one of the things I wasn't a huge fan of, because it seems like when you speak to him about everything else, he has that kind of that ability to see things for what they really are. But when you talk about the relationship between Templars and mages, he was a Templar, so he was basically taught the way that the Templar behave is correct, and the way that mages behave needs to be subservient and submissive to the Templar order. And it's like the one blind spot that Alistair seems to have, where he doesn't actually look at it objectively, and he just sees what he's been taught. And it gets a little frustrating at times, the way he interacts with Morrigan. It's just like, yeah, we've been together long enough that you should know she's not really a problem. And that should be enough for you to start questioning all the crap the Templars say about wild mages.
Well, that is true, but you unfortunately don't get the full experience of what he's seen in the past. So he may have been at the Mage's Tower. He could have been doing this or that. Maybe his only job was to hunt down rogue mages, and that's all he knows. So his experience may be seeing the outcomes of when mages go wild. And so now when you're thrust with somebody who is a wild mage, this can't be good. So you don't get to experience that from his point of view, but you can appreciate that there's a consistency in writing there. It's not like, oh, well, maybe I'll just give this one wild mage a chance. At least he's consistent with his nature.
He is. And it's just that it's this one thing where like that consistency feels out of place, because when you look at the way he approaches other situations, it feels inconsistent with his character. But you have to remember he was basically raised as a Templar. So that's where like all of his suspicion of Morrigan comes from. And it makes a lot of sense in the world, but it is one of those things like, especially because I was playing this when I was younger, you just want to be like, all right, I've shown you all of the evidence you need to see in order to recognize you need to stop thinking that way. And that's not how people work. If they've been thinking a certain way for a long period of time, even if they're open to the evidence in front of them, they're not going to quickly flip a switch and fix their way of thinking. It's going to take time.
Yeah. And Alistair is very much like me in terms of Dragon Age Origins, because I saw Dragon Age Origins like it's not like Baldur's Gate enough. I have these issues with it, but they're not real issues, and I had to get over that. And so Alistair is very much like me in that regard, and like I said, I totally understand. So you can have a point of view and just realize you're wrong, but at the same time, it isn't what you expect it to be. So you're always a little, on the edge of what it should be, kind of like type thing. Mm-hmm. So you kind of see Alistair as this fully capable. At least he's not plain Jane. At least he's not like Hayden. At least he's not like
Jacob.
Yeah, Jacob's a better example. This presents to be this wholesome character who actually is not. They could have written him like that very easily. Mm-hmm. And they chose a more dynamic character, and I do think if you kind of watch his progression throughout the entire timeline, it's a great arc. It's one of the best BioWare's ever done. It's just because of how they lay the foundation, it makes it very difficult to want to like push through and see that. But yeah, it's there. When you bring Alistair along, though, you get one of the best, most iconic interactions between characters in all of gaming, possibly, and that's when you run across Morrigan. The whole Alistair Morrigan dynamic is set from that very beginning, and it is great. She says, "Oh, you believe that we will swoop down and catch you off guard or whatever," and he says, "Oh yes, swooping is bad."
Yeah.
He's great for all that. But yes, Morrigan is the next person we run into. Now, she's not an immediate companion, of course, but she does become a companion. And unfortunately, Kam is not here with us today, but I feel very confident that he would say that Morrigan is by far his favorite character. And it's a good reason why. She is a great, amazing, iconic character.
Yeah. I think within the Origins game, she is one of the most interesting, and I think she's immediately presented that way. So like we said with Alistair, he's kind of presented to you and you're just like, oh, he's a Templar. He's essentially like this knight in shining armor kind of cliche, and he's got a little bit of a sense of humor to him. So he's not really deviating from this mold that I'm familiar with. But Morrigan she is an outcast. She's an exile. She's a lawbreaker, and this very confident, independent mage living in the wilds. She's pretty much immediately interesting. You're met with somebody who's on the run from the law, essentially. Like her entire existence is illegal, and she doesn't seem at all afraid of that. So I think when I first met her, I wanted to know where that confidence comes from, and how she's been kind of living that life for her entire life. And you also see this weird relationship she has with Flemeth almost immediately, where she does obey Flemeth, but it's clearly not what she really agrees with. There's a lot of things that Flemeth tells her to do, and she wants to argue, but she seems to hold her tongue. And you're pretty much immediately curious, like, all right, why? Because you haven't held your tongue around anyone. You've been kind of mocking a Templar, mocking Alistair, who is somebody who's trained to hunt you down and deal with you. But for whatever reason, when you're speaking to Flemeth, you have this reverence that you won't show anybody else. So I think she is immediately presented to you as interesting. And then the more you get to know her, she gives you a lot more insight, and that dynamic between her and Flemeth becomes one of the most interesting things about her.
Morrigan character could have very easily been portrayed as the Witch of the Wilds. In other words, like, there is no Flemeth or whatever. It's you're meeting the Witch of the Wilds. And that would have played so differently to the character of Morrigan, because Morrigan, for all of her confidence, is very naive. She doesn't have the learning experiences. She only knows what her mother's taught her and her brief interactions she's had with humans. So she gets to engage in certain activities that she finds extremely confusing. She says, "What is with all the touching? Why are y'all always touching each other?" I don't understand. And as an isolationist, I'm an only child. I can kind of appreciate where Morrigan is coming from. It's like, why must there be this interaction? You can get along just fine, and you can probably get things done faster if you just do it yourself. Why do we need to cooperate? What is this necessity to build cities? This makes no sense. I totally get it. The Morrigan character at least is consistent in that regard. I will say about this, all of the companions are consistent, every single one of them. It's not till we get to Dragon Age 2 and 3 that some deviations occur, but of course we're just trying to stay on topic for Origins, but each one of these companions is extremely consistent. Wynn might be the only one who isn't, but we'll get to her later. But Morrigan definitely has a lack of worldly experience. And so as she's thrust into these new situations more and more, she's very adaptable. She kind of shows her capability in each scenario, but she's also not quick. She's quick to judge, but she's not quick to act on her judgments, because if she was, then the true Witch of the Wilds would be seen, and then you would probably see the reason why the Templars act the way they do. So Morrigan has a lot of self-mindedness, just being able to gauge the situation and say, I don't like this. This doesn't make sense to me, but that's why I'm not going to act on it, because it doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't mean that it doesn't make sense to the situation. So she lays in wait, and she's patient. That's probably her biggest attribute that gets missed, is her patience. Her ability to sit back and just let things play out sometimes allows her to assess the scene, and then she can make a remark. And then, of course, she's still probably confused by it and still has to make a comment saying, I don't like this, I don't like that, that doesn't make sense, that we should have done it like this. But she also doesn't get vehemently upset about things the way that they turn out.
Yeah, I think that's something that you see a lot in her development. Like, she'll make a quick comment about something, but she does seem more curious than judgmental. And I think that it's kind of that same like facade we see with Alistair, where he wants people to think he's not taking it very seriously, but he also knows what's at stake. I think Morrigan wants people to think she is this harsh and cold person, but she's really eager to learn. So she she has a lot of those kind of biting comments about the way society works, but inside she kind of has this longing to be a part of society because she's never been allowed to. She's always been this exiled apostate. So I think that kind of facade that you can see through as a player very quickly and you get to see slowly break down over the course of time is one of those things that really makes for engaging characters, because you almost feel like you know the character immediately and you get to see them kind of open up and relax and share with you all of the stuff that like you already had a pretty good understanding of.
Yeah, her mother Flemeth is one of the more confusing relationships you see with Morrigan, because every conversation you have with Morrigan when it comes to her mother, she's obviously not upset with her, but she is very confused by her and who her nature truly possibly is. And yet every story she kind of says, well, that she does say about Morrigan seems to be a pretty cruel upbringing. You know, one time Morrigan has a mirror that she was able to collect from some humans who left it behind. I forget the exact story, but she collected it and she just thought, hey, here's something just for me. And it's kind of neat. It's real pretty and whatever. It's a mirror. And her mother got rid of it. I think she says in the story that she destroyed it or something, but you're able to find it again later on as one of those gifts. And that's one of those, like, if that story is true, she either got rid of it or destroyed it. I mean, what the one little thing that she would have had, her mother got rid of. So you get these little tidbits of who Flemeth is, like almost like this bad parent. And yet Morrigan doesn't see her that way. And it's one of the more confusing relationships you have. So you almost want to engage a little bit more just to find out what really is going on here. Not so much because of the relationship, but that relationship is obviously going to play an impact because you're asked to, Flemeth does save you. She has her reasons. She gives you some more information. And then as you talk to Morrigan a little bit more, she gives you a little bit more information about Flemeth. So you're kind of thinking there's something to this character as well. And Flemeth is such a huge, major plot device for the entire Dragon Age series that they almost didn't lay enough groundwork in Origins for that to become obvious. But knowing what we know now, everything through Veilguard for Flemeth, that Morrigan being somewhat reticent in her judgment of Flemeth makes sense now. But at the time it's so confusing. It's like, what if she was such a bad parent, why didn't she feel? She does have some anger issues against her mother, but not really the way you would think, because if you're 25, 26, however old Morrigan is, this old, and being constantly suppressed by your parent, you would think there'd be some kind of tension there that is more obvious than what you see.
They're both effectively playing into this Witch of the Wilds like myth, and they use that in order to ensure their own survival. So when you speak to Morrigan about her mother, she almost feels like, or it almost feels like she's playing into the stories about the Witch of the Wilds and kind of exaggerating things or misleading you. So she never really gives you a sincere, honest depiction of her mother. So it's really tough to evaluate what she really thinks of her mother, because almost the same way that Alistair holds on to that Templar belief, Morrigan holds on to that kind of survival instinct of building up what Flemeth is capable of and making her seem like this incredibly dangerous force. And I mean, ultimately Flemeth is, but I think when you talk to Morrigan about it, she might be exaggerating some of the interactions she's had with Flemeth, partially because she was a child and partially because it's necessary for people to be afraid of Flemeth in order for Flemeth to be safe. And that was how Morrigan stayed safe.
We always talk about there could be potential spoilers here. So Flemeth is cultivating that too, because she needs to get out of this scenario so that she can go into the next path that she sees in front of her. So she antagonizes the situation enough to where you're having to go back and then defeat her dragon form. So that's one of the dragons you fight. And when you kill her, she's not really dead, because we find out in Dragon Age 2, this was her plot all along. She needed to go from one source to another source. And in order for her to remove and shed the experience of being the Witch of the Wilds in the Kakari Wilds, she needs to go over here. And that's what you see. So you see this person who's playing the long game, basically. So her interactions with Morrigan and stuff, it's all contrived. It's all on purpose. Flemeth, like I said, is an amazing character, and we don't have enough time to go over really even Flemeth, but because she covers 4 Dragon Age games. But really, this character of Morrigan is almost planting a seed for the bigger picture, the bigger scope. And a lot of in fact, Dragon Age Origins is heavily inspired from Lord of the Rings. So much of it is, some of it's 1-to-1. I could say Alistair's almost kind of in that Aragorn type model in a way, but he doesn't have the worldly, he doesn't have the long life to get to that point where he's aged and experienced and stuff, but he's in that type of arc though. Morrigan is definitely that mage who's powerful but is holding back the power just until they get to the point where it's necessary. They have combat powers, of course, and stuff, but then you see a much greater power come out of them later on. But yeah, she's great. One thing about Claudia Black, she never did any voice acting before for games or anything prior to Dragon Age. And so when they went up to her and wanted her to do this, she was really not wanting to do it, because she's like, that doesn't make sense. That's not something I do. But now she loves the character, and I couldn't imagine anybody else being that character. And then there's Dog. You know, his best attribute is the fact that he's a dog.
I mean, you don't really need more than that.
You acquire the Mabari after you get done with the initial battle at Ostagar. And if you play Human Noble, though, Human Noble has this dog from the very beginning, although it's not a companion until after Ostagar. So it is great that they recognize the tying there, that this is where the dog comes from, the origin of the dog. But again, if you don't have the human nobility origin, there's only one. There's no human poor origin. It's just human nobility. You can appreciate, like, okay, this is a war dog. That's how it's bred to be. And it decided, you healed it. You treated it in the camp, and you can still do the same mission. It's just that your particular Mabari is, I guess, fine. So when you have the Mabari, and you can name it however you want to, it's your Mabari. They have little war paint markings that you can you can get as kind of like a armor for your dog, but they have different attributes and stuff. That's about it, though. So a lot of people,
they're like, the only equipment is a collar and that war paint.
Yeah, a lot of people take the mod for Dragon Age Origins for the 5th companion, which is always the Mabari. So the Mabari is always with you. I've never done that personally, but I know it is probably the most popular mod update.
Makes sense. I mean, it is one of those things where, like, I, again, don't remember bringing the dog with me to a lot of places because I didn't have that mod, and it feels like you're giving up a lot for the bringing this dog along, because, like we're saying, the equipment is limited, so you don't get a lot of the kind of buffs you can get from various armor pieces and weapons that you can give to other characters, because there are a lot of unique weapons in the game. and you don't get any of the banter. You get a little bit where other companions are talking about the dog, but it's a dog. It can't speak back. So your banter is pretty limited. There's not going to be a lot of story elements that are impacted by having your dog with you. So, if you go to the mage's circle with a Templar in your party and an apostate, they're going to have things to say about that. Your dog is not going to have things to say about that. So there's a lot with the dog that feels like a big sacrifice, and having that additional character slot for just the dog to always be along feels almost like it should have been base game. But yeah, I totally get that. A lot of people want them along, but they're not willing to sacrifice one of their 3 companion slots for the dog.
I could see as quality of life bringing the dog along for that mod, because in hindsight, I mean, even Baldur's Gate 3 does the bring along Scratch, and it's more of like a companion to your existing companions. That works. Right. That does work. It's not like they're overpowered or anything. So just like the dog is not overpowered. So, there are moments though where there's not enough of them, in my opinion, for Origins, where the dogs can assist you, not the dog that you have, but like when you're at the Battle of Ostagar, there's some cages where you're in the tower, and there's these cages with the locked Mabari, and you're fighting Darkspawn. Before the Darkspawn know that you're there, you can release the cages. If you do that, then they can help you during those battles. And there's not enough of those type situations, I think. Of course, you're not always going to be in a situation where there's going to be Mabari around, but like the Underdark, and not the Underdark, it was the Dark Roads or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it might be the Deep Roads.
Yeah. But I always called it the Underdark. It's just a force of habit. But anyway, there's not enough of those. But my point here is that there's plenty of overland maps, and you just unfortunately don't get enough where there could be like, because there's supposed to be like this notorious group. Now we can't imagine there would probably be a ton of them, but from a story standpoint, I would hope that they'd be here and there, like even with the mages in the mage tower from time to time with the Templars, they could possibly use them, but who knows, whatever. But yeah, so those were the 3 we want to cover today: Alistair, Morrigan, and Dog.
Dog the bounty hunter.
Any parts of these characters that you thought we missed in the comments? Like the video, of course, if you like the video. And we will check you guys later. Bye-bye.